Chapter 16 of Darnley by G.P.R. James. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 16. Tybalt. Gentlemen, good den, a word with one of you. Mercutio. And but one word with one of us? Couple it with something. Make it a word and a blow. Tybalt. You shall find me apt enough to that, sir, if you give me occasion. Romeo and Juliet. Scarcely knowing what he did, Sir Osborne sprang after Dr. Butts, and walked on with him for a minute or two in silence, while his brain turned, and all his thoughts and feelings whirled in inextricable confusion. "Ah!" muttered the physician to himself, seeing the absent, agitated air of his young companion. "Ah! You've been making a fool of yourself, I see, though you've not had much time either." The murmuring of the good doctor, however, did not disturb in the least the young knight's reverie, which might have lasted an indefinite space of time, had he not been roused therefrom by a smart tap on the shoulder. Laying his hand upon his sword, he turned suddenly round and beheld Lord Darby, who, seeing him grasp the hilt of his weapon, pointed to it coolly, saying, "Not here, sir, not here, but anywhere else you please." "What would you with me, sir?" demanded the knight, not exactly understanding his object, though quite ready to quarrel upon any provocation that might occur. "But a trifle," replied the earl. "You looked at me some 5 minutes past as if I had offended you in something. Now, that being the case, I am ready to make reparation at the sword's point when and where it may suit your convenience." "But, my good lord," said Dr. Butts, who had turned back, "this is a mistake. How can you have offended this good knight, who never saw you till to-day?" "Oh, the problem, my good doctor," replied Lord Darby. "Why does a farmer's cur bark at a beggar, and let a ruffling gallant swagger by? Perchance the knight may not like my countenance, my complexion, my nose may not please him, my mouth, the cut of my beard." "Faith, neither one nor the other pleases me particularly," answered Sir Osborne. "At all events, my lord, if your wish be to quarrel with me, I will not balk your humour. So say your will, and have it." "Oh, if that be the case," said Lord Darby, "and you'd rather be quarrelled with than quarrel, the offence shall come on my part. Fair sir, I dislike that scar upon your brow so much that I shall not be content till I make its fellow on your heart. Therefore, when your good humour serves to give me an opportunity of tilting at your nose, you will find me your very humble servant." "Nay, now, my lord," cried Dr. Butts, "I must witness that you have given the provocation; for under any other circumstances this gentleman is so situated that 'twould be mere madness to meet you as you wish." "If it be provocation he desires," cried the earl, "he shall have a dish of it, so cooked as to serve an emperor. He is a gentleman, I suppose, and worth a gentleman's sword." "Your equal in every respect, and your better in many," replied the knight; "and in regard to provocation, I have had as much, my lord, as your body may well bear in repayment. How do you choose to fight?" "Quietly, quietly," answered the earl. "A few inches of tough steel are as good as a waggon load. A double-edged sword, sir, such as we both wear, may serve our turn, I should suppose; and as it may be unpleasant to both of us to make the monster multitude busy with our little affair, we will be single, hand to hand. I do detest the habit of making the satisfaction of private wrongs the public amusement. We'll have no crowds, sir, to look on and criticise our passados, as if we were gladiators on a stage. Where shall it be?" "Why, faith, my lord," answered the knight, "as I am a mere stranger here, I know but of one place. The gardens of my Lord of Buckingham, at the Rose, are large, and I remarked this morning a grove where there must be good space and quiet. If, therefore, you will inquire for me at his grace's dwelling this evening, at 4 of the clock, you will find me prepared to receive you." Lord Darby waved his hand for his page to come up, who stood chattering with the footboy that had accompanied the knight; and taking from him a case of tablets, he wrote down the name of Sir Osborne, and the place and hour he had appointed. "And now, fair sir," said he, "I will leave you. I shall not miss my hour. Good doctor, your profession has doubtless taught you secrecy, and so farewell." So saying, Lord Darby walked away, leaving Sir Osborne with Dr. Butts. "Ah!" cried the physician, "a bad business, a bad business. Yet it cannot be helped. If two people will fall in love with the same woman, what can be done? But it's a bad business for you. If he kills you, why that is not pleasant, and if you kill him, you must fly your country. A bad business, a bad business. But fare ye well. Don't kill him if you can help it, for he's not bad as times go. Wound him badly, then it may be mended. Fare ye well, fare ye well." And turning away, he left Sir Osborne, not appearing to take much heed of the approaching duel, though, in reality, deeply occupied with the means of preventing it, without betraying the trust that had been reposed in him. Sir Osborne was not displeased to be left to his own meditations, and plunged in thought, he followed his young guide down a narrow lane, running between the gardens of York and Durham houses. "I thought, sir, you might like to take a boat," said the boy, who was himself completely wearied out with waiting for the night, "and so brought your worship down here, where there is always a boatman. 'Twill save 3 miles, your worship." Sir Osborne signified his assent, and the boat being procured, he was soon after landed within a short distance of St. Lawrence Poultney, where he was received with great respect by the duke's household, and formally marshalled to his apartment. 2 hours still remained to the time of rendezvous, which he spent in writing to his father, never thinking, however, of alluding to his approaching rencontre; for in truth, though not vain either of his skill or strength, he had enjoyed so many opportunities of proving both, that he well knew it must be a strong and dexterous man indeed who would not lie greatly at his mercy in such an encounter as that which was to ensue. In the meanwhile, Lord Darby, carried away by passion, thought of nothing but his approaching meeting, and though he looked upon Sir Osborne as some knight attached to the Duke of Buckingham, he was very willing to pass over any little difference of rank for the sake of gratifying the angry feelings by which he was possessed. He was, however, very greatly surprised, when on presenting himself towards 4 o'clock at the manor house of the Rose, he found that the same attendance and respect waited Sir Osborne Maurice, a man he had never even heard of, as he had seen paid to the Duke of Buckingham himself. 2 servants marshalled the way to the knight's apartments, one ran on before to announce him, and with a deference and attention which evidently did not proceed from his own rank, for he had not given his name, but rather, apparently, from the station of the person whom he went to visit, he was ushered into the splendid apartments which had been assigned to the knight. Sir Osborne rose from the table where he had been writing, and with graceful but frigid courtesy invited him to be seated, which was complied with by the earl, till such time as the servants were gone. "Now, my lord," said Sir Osborne, as soon as the door was shut, "I am at your service. I will finish my writing at my return. Will you examine my sword? 'Tis apparently somewhat longer than yours, but here is one that is shorter. Now, sir." "That is shorter than mine," said Lord Darby. "Have you not another?" "Not here," replied the knight; "but this will do, if you are satisfied that it is not longer than your own. By this passage we shall find our way to the garden privately, as I am informed. Pardon me if I lead the way." Lord Darby followed in silence, perhaps not quite so contented with the business in which he had engaged as when he undertook it. There was a sort of calm determination in Sir Osborne's manner, that had something in it very unpleasantly impressive, and the young peer began to think it would have been better to have sought some explanation ere he had hurried himself into circumstances of which might be unnecessary danger. However, he felt that it was now too late to make any advance towards such a measure, and there, too, in the knight's cap, still stood the identical large sapphire ring, which, if he might believe his eyes, he had seen 1,000 times on the hand of his promised wife. The sight thereof served marvellously well to stir up his anger, and striding on, he kept equal pace with Sir Osborne down the long alley which led from the house into the deep grove near the side of the river. The knight paused at a spot where the trees concealed them from the view of the house, and opening out into a small amphitheatre, gave full space for the deadly exercise in which they were about to be engaged. "Now, Lord Darby," said he, drawing his sword and throwing down the scabbard before him, "you see me as I stand. and as a knight and a gentleman I have no other arms, offensive or defensive, but this sword, so help me God." "And so say I," replied Lord Darby, "upon my honour." And following the knight's example, he drew his sword, cast the sheath away from him, and brought his blade across that of his adversary. "Madman! What are you about to do?" cried a stern voice from the wood. "Put up! Put up!" And the moment after, the diminutive form of Sir Cesar the astrologer stood directly between them. "What devil," he continued, parting their drawn swords with his bare hands, "what devil has tempted ye of all other men, destined to bring about each other's happiness? What devil, I say, has tempted ye to point these idle weapons at each other's life?" "Sir Cesar," said Lord Darby, "I am well aware that you possess the means of seeing into the future by some method, for which scurrilous people hint that you are likely to be damned pretty heartily in the next world. So you are just the person to settle our dispute. But tell us, which it is of us two that is destined to slay the other, and then the one who is doomed to taste cold iron this day will have nothing to do but to offer his throat, for depend upon it, only one will leave this spot alive." "Talk not so lightly of death, young lord," replied the old man, "for 'tis a bitter and unsavoury cup to drink, as thou shalt find when thy brain swims, and thy heart grows sick, and thine eye loses its light, and thy parting spirit reels upon the brink of a dim and shadowy world. But I tell thee that both shall leave this spot alive, though if any one remain upon this sward, full surely it were thyself, for thou art as much fitted to cope with him as a sapling with the thunderbolt of heaven. But listen, each of you, I adjure you. State what you demand of the other, and if, after all, ye be still bent upon blood, blood ye shall have. But full sure I am that now neither fool knows what the other seeks." Both the antagonists stood silent, gazing first on each other and then on Sir Cesar, as if they knew not what to reply, and both feeling that there might be some truth in what the old man advanced. At length, however, Lord Darby broke forth. "God's life, what he says is true. Sir Osborne Maurice, what do you seek from me?" "Speak, speak!" cried Sir Cesar, turning to the knight, who seemed to hesitate. "Speak, if the generous blood of 1,000 noble ancestors be still warm in your veins. Be candid, and charge him like a man." Sir Osborne's cheek burned. "The quarrel is his own seeking," said he; "but what I have to say, I know not how to speak, without violating the confidence of a lady, which cannot be." "Then I will speak for you," said Sir Cesar. "Lord Darby, he demands that you shall yield all claim and all pursuit of Lady Constance de Grey. This is his demand. Now for yours. Oh, if I am deceived in you, woe to you and yours for ever." "I can scarcely suppose," replied the earl, with bitter emphasis, "that such be this knight's demand, when I see the ring of another lady borne openly in his bonnet, a lady that shall never be his so long as one drop of blood flows in my veins." "This ring, my lord," replied Sir Osborne, taking it from the plume of his hat, "was only trusted with me as a deposit to transmit to the person to whom it originally belonged, claiming his advice for a lady, whose affianced lover was, as report said, about to wed another. Sir Cesar, I give it unto you for whom it was intended." "Faith, I have been in the wrong," cried Lord Darby, extending his hand frankly to Sir Osborne. "In the first place, pardon me, sir knight, for having insulted you; and next, let me say that in regard to Lady Constance de Grey, I have no claim but that of kindred upon her affection, and none upon her hand. Farther, if you can show that your rank entitles you to such alliance, none will be happier than myself to aid you in your suit; though let me observe, without meaning offence, that the name of Sir Osborne Maurice is unknown to me, except as connected with the history of the last reign. And now, sir, having said thus much, doubtless you will explain to me how that ring came into your possession, and by what motives Lady Katrine Bulmer could have induced to confide her most private affairs to a gentleman who can be but an acquaintance of a month." "Most willingly," replied the knight; and after detailing to Lord Darby the circumstances which we already know, he added, The letter of which I speak is still in my possession, and if you will return with me to the house, I will deliver it to you, as I cannot doubt, from what you say, that the report of a marriage being in agitation between yourself and Lady Constance de Grey originated in some mistake." "Faith, not a whit," cried the earl. "The report is unhappily too true. The lord cardinal, whom we all know to be one degree greater than the greatest man in England, has laid his commands upon me to marry my cousin Constance, although both my heart and my honour are plighted to another, and has equally ordered my cousin to wed me, although her heart be, very like, fully as much given away as mine. However, never supposing we could think of disobeying, he has already sent to Rome for all those permissions and indulgences which are necessary for first cousins in such cases; and on my merely hinting in a sweet and dutiful manner that it might be better to see first whether it pleased the lady, he replied, meekly, that it pleased him, and that it pleased the king, which was quite enough both for her and me." This information did not convey the most pleasing sensations to Sir Osborne's heart, and in a moment there flashed through his mind 1,000 vague but evil auguries. Danger to Constance herself, the ruin of his father's hopes, the final destruction of his house and family, and all the train of sorrows and of evils that might follow, if Wolsey were to discover his rash love, hurried before his eyes like the thronging phantoms of a painful dream, and clouded his brow with a deep shade of thoughtful melancholy. "Fear not, Osborne Darnley," said Sir Cesar, seeing the gloomy look of the young knight. "This cardinal is great, but there is one greater than he who beholds his pride, and shall break him like a reed. Nor in this thing shall his will be obeyed. Believe what I say to you, for it is true. I warned you once of coming dangers, and you doubted me; but the evils I foresaw fell upon your head. Doubt me not then now. But still I see fear sits upon your eyelids. Come then, both of you, with me, for in this both your destinies are linked for some time together. Spend with me 1 hour this night, and I will show you that which shall ease your hearts." And he turned towards the house, beckoning them to follow. "I suppose, then, your lordship is satisfied," said Sir Osborne, taking up the scabbard of his sword, and replacing it with the weapon in his belt, as the astrologer moved away. "I should be more satisfied," said Lord Darby, laying his hand on the knight's arm with a frank smile, "if you would confide in me. Indeed, I have no title to pry into your secrets," he added, "nor in those of Constance either, though I think she might have told me of this yesterday, when I made her a partaker of all mine. However, I cannot believe that the profound reverence in which all the duke's servants seem to hold you can be excited by the unknown Sir Osborne Maurice. Besides, Sir Cesar called you but now Osborne Darnley. Can it be that I am speaking to the Lord Darnley, who from his feats at the court of the Princess Dowager goes amongst us by the surname of the Knight of Burgundy?" "I shall not deny my name, Lord Darby," replied the knight. "I am, as you say, Lord Darnley; but as this has fallen into your knowledge by mere accident, I shall hold you bound in honour to forget it." "Nay," replied the earl, "I shall remember it, to render you, if possible, all service. But come, Darnley, as by a mistake we began bitter enemies, now let us end dear friends. I can aid you much, you can aid me much, and between us both surely we shall be able to break the trammels with which the cardinal enthralls us. We will put 4 young heads against 1 old one, and the world to nothing we shall win." There was a frankness in Lord Darby's manner that it was impossible to resist, and taking the hand he tendered him, the young adventurer met his offered friendship with equal candour. With the openness natural to youth, the plans of each were soon told, the sooner, indeed, that their future prospects and endeavours so greatly depended for success upon their sincere co-operation, and thus they sauntered back to the house, with very different feelings from those with which they had left it. Before they had arrived at the steps of the door, they had run through 1,000 details, and were as much prepared to act together as if their acquaintance had been of many years' duration. No sooner did the young knight hear that his new friend had not yet been introduced to the king, that he at once proposed to be the person to do it, offering to call for him in his barge the next day but one, and convey him to the court at Greenwich, where he undertook to procure him a good reception. "It may be difficult," he said, "to find private audience of those two persons whom we both feel most anxious to meet. Dame Fortune, however, may befriend us; but we must be cautious even to an excess, for Wolsey has eyes that see where he is not present, and ears that hear over half the realm, and the first step to make our plans successful, depend upon it, is to conceal them. But lo, where Sir Cesar stands at the window of the hall. Now, in the name of fortune, where will he lead us to night? 'Tis strange that there should be men so gifted with rare qualities as to see into the deepest secrets of nature, to view things that to others are concealed, and yet seemingly to profit little by their knowledge, for never did I meet or hear of one of these astrologers that were either happier or more fortunate than other men. And yet what were the good to Sir Cesar to boast a knowledge that he did not possess? For he seeks no reward, will accept of no recompense, and hourly exposes what he says to contradiction if it be not true. But doubtless it is true, for every day gives proof thereof. That man is a riddle, which would have gained the Sphinx a good dinner off Oedipus. You seem to know him well, but I dare say know no more of him than any one else does, for no one that I ever met knows who he is, nor where he comes from, nor where he goes to. And yet he is well received everywhere, courted, ay, and even loved, for he is beneficent, charitable, and humane; is rich, though it is unknown whence his wealth arises, and possesses wonderful knowledge, though, I fear me, wickedly acquired. I have heard that those poor wretches who have mastered forbidden secrets often strive to repair, by every good deed, the evil that their presumptuous curiosity has done to their own souls. God knows how it is. But come, let us join him. The information we gain from him, at all events, is sure." Entering the manor house, they passed on into the hall, where they found Sir Cesar buried in deep thought, and while the young knight proceeded to his own apartments to procure the letter which Lady Katrine Bulmer had entrusted to him, the Earl of Derby approached the old knight with that sort of constitutional gaiety which, like a spoiled servant, would very often play the master with its lord. "Well, Sir Cesar," cried he, "where are your thoughts roaming? In the world above or the world below?" "Farther in heaven than you will ever be," replied the old man. "Nay, then," continued the earl, "as you can tell everything, past, present, and to come, could you divine what we were talking of but now in the gardens?" "At first you were talking of what did concern yourselves, and afterwards of what did not concern you," answered the knight. "Magic, my faith!" cried the earl; "and in truth you're coming just in the nick of time, as folks have it, to save us from slicing each other's throats, must have a spice of magic in it too." "If one used magic for so weak a purpose as that of saving an empty head like thine," replied the knight, "it would be worthy the jest with which you treat it. Fools and children attribute everything to magic that they do not comprehend. But, however, my coming here had none. Was it not easy for one friend to tell another that he had heard two mad young men name a place to slaughter each other, they knew not for what? But here comes thy companion. Read thy letter, and then come with me, for the light is waning, and the hour comes on when I can show ye both some part at least of your destiny." Lord Darby eagerly cut the silk which fastened Lady Katrine's letter, and read it with that air of intense earnestness which can never be put on, and which would have removed from the mind of Sir Osborne any doubt of the young earl's feelings, even if he had still continued to entertain such. This being done, they prepared to accompany Sir Cesar, who insisted that not even a page should follow them, and accordingly Lord Darby's attendant was ordered to remain behind and wait his lord's return. Passing then out into the street, they soon found themselves in the most crowded part of the city of London, which was at that time of the evening filled with the various classes of mechanics, clerks, and artists, returning to their homes from their diurnal toll. Gliding through the midst of them, Sir Cesar passed on, not in the least heeding the remarks which his diminutive size and singular apparel called forth, though Lord Darby did not seem particularly to relish a promenade through the city with such a companion, and very possibly might have left Sir Osborne to proceed alone, if he liked it, had not that strong curiosity which we all experience to read into the future carried him on to the end. Darkness now began to fall upon their path, and still the old man led them forward through 1,000 dark and intricate turnings, till at length, in what appeared to be a narrow lane, the houses of which approached so closely together that it would have been an easy leap from the windows on one side of the way into those of the other, the old knight stopped and struck 3 strokes with the hilt of his dagger upon a door on the left hand. It was opened almost immediately by a tall, meagre man, holding in his hand a small silver lamp, which he applied close to the face of Sir Cesar before he would permit any one to pass. "Il maestro!" he cried, as soon as he saw the dark, small features of the astrologer, making him at the same time a profound inclination. "Entra, dotissimo! Benvenuto, benvenuto sia!" Sir Cesar replied in an undertone, and taking the lamp from the Italian, motioned Sir Osborne and the earl to follow. The staircase up which he conducted them was excessively small, narrow, and winding, bespeaking one of the meanest houses in the city; and what still more excited their surprise, they mounted nearly 40 steps without perceiving any door or outlet whatever, except where a blast of cold air, through a sort of loophole in the wall, announced their proximity to the street. At length the astrologers stopped opposite a door only large enough to admit the passage of one person at a time, through which he led the way, when, to the astonishment of both Sir Osborne and the earl, they found themselves in a magnificent oblong apartment, nearly 40 feet in length, and rather more than 20 in breadth. On each side were ranged tables and stands, covered with various specimens of ancient art, which, rare in any age, were then 1,000 times more scarce than they are now. Although the taking of Constantinople, about 70 years before, by driving many of the Greeks among whom elegance and science long lingered, into other countries, had revived already in some degree the taste for the arts of painting and sculpture, still few, very few, even of the princes of Europe, could boast such beautiful specimens as those which that chamber contained. Here stood a statue, there an urn. On one table was an alabaster capital of exquisite workmanship, on another a bas-relief whose figures seemed struggling from the stone. Medals and gems, and specimens of curious ores, were mingled with the rest, and many a book, written in strange and unknown characters, lay open before their eyes. There, too, were various instruments of curious shape and device, whose purpose they could not even guess. While here frowned a man in armour, there grinned a skeleton, and there, swathed in its historic bands, stood an Egyptian mummy, resting its mouldering and shapeless head against the feet of a figure, in which some long-dead artist had laboured skilfully to display all the exquisite lines of female loveliness. To observe all this the 2 young men had full opportunity, while Sir Cesar proceeded forward, stopping between each table, and bringing the flame of the lamp he carried in contact with 6 others, which stood upon a row of ancient bronze tripods ranged along the side of the hall. At the end of the room hung a large black curtain, on each side of which was a clock of very curious manufacture, the one showing apparently the year, the day, the hour, and the minute, and the other exposing a figure of the zodiac, round which moved a multitude of strange hieroglyphic signs, some so rapidly that the eye could scarcely distinguish their course, some so slow that their motion was hardly to be discerned. As Sir Osborne and Lord Darby approached, Sir Cesar drew back the curtain, and exposed to their sight an immense mirror, in which they could clearly distinguish their own figures, and that of the astrologer, reflected at full length. "Mark," said Sir Cesar, "and from what you shall see, draw your own inference. But question me not, for I vowed when I received that precious gift, which is now before you, never to make one comment upon what is displayed. Mark, and when you have seen, leave me." "But I see nothing," said Sir Osborne, "except my own reflection in the glass." "Patience, patience, impetuous spirit!" cried the old man. "Will 100 lives never teach thee calmness? Look at the mirror." Sir Osborne turned his eyes to the glass, but still nothing new met his view, and after gazing for a minute or two, he suffered his glance to wander to the clock by his side, which now struck 8 with a clear, sweet, musical sound. At that moment Lord Darby laid his hand on his arm. "God's my life!" cried he, "we are vanishing away! Look, look!" Sir Osborne turned to the glass, and beheld the 3 figures he had before seen plain and distinctly, now growing dimmer and more dim. He could scarcely believe his sight, and passing his hand before his eyes, he strove, as it were, to cure them of the delusion. When he looked again, all was gone, and the mirror offered nothing but a dark, shining blank. Presently, however, a confusion of thin and misty figures seemed to pass over the glass, and a light appeared to spring up within itself. Gradually the objects took a more substantial form. The interior of the mirror assumed the appearance of a smaller chamber than that which they were in, lighted by a lattice window, and in the centre was seen a female figure leaning in a pensive attitude on a table. Sir Osborne thought it was like Lady Katrine Bulmer, but the light coming from behind cast her features into shadow. The moment after, however, a door of the chamber seemed to open, and he could plainly distinguish a figure resembling that of Lord Darby enter, and clasp her in his arms, with a semblance of joy so naturally portrayed that it was hardly possible to suppose it unreal. While he yet gazed, the outlines of the figures began to grow confused and indistinct, and various ill-defined forms floated over the glass. Gradually, however, they again assumed shape and feature. The mirror represented a princely hall hung with cloth of gold, and 1,000 gay and splendid figures ranged themselves round the scene. Princes and prelates and warriors moved before their eyes, as if 'twas all in life. There may be seen the slight significant look, the animated gesture, the whisper apart, the stoop of age, the high erect carriage of knight and noble, and the graceful motion of youth and beauty. "By heavens!" cried Lord Darby, "there is the Earl of Devonshire, and the Duke of Suffolk, and the Princess Mary. It is the court of England. But no, who are all these?" Gradually the crowd opened, and 2 persons appeared, whose apparel, demeanour, and glance bespoke them royal. "Henry himself, as I live!" cried Lord Darby. "Which? Which?" demanded Sir Osborne. "The one to the right," answered the earl. "The other I know not." It was the other, however, who advanced, leading forward by the hand a knight, in whom Sir Osborne might easily distinguish the simulacre of himself. The prince, whoever he was, seemed to speak, and a lady came forth from the rest. By the graceful motion, by the timid look, by the rich light brown hair, as well as by all a lover's feelings, Sir Osborne could not doubt that it was Constance de Grey. The monarch took her hand, placed it in that of the knight. The figures grew dim, and the glass misty, but gradually clearing away, it resumed its original effect, and reflected the hall in which they were, their own forms standing before the mirror, and the old man, Sir Cesar, sitting on the ground, with his hands pressed over his eyes. The moment they turned round, he started up. "It is done," cried he; "so now be gone. We shall meet again soon." And putting his finger to his lip, as if requiring silence, he led them out of the hall and down the stairs, signed them with the cross, and left them. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of Darnley by G.P.R. James. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 17. There grows in my most ill-composed affection a quenchless avarice, that were I king, I should cut off the nobles for their lands. Macbeth. Oh, the man in the moon, the man in the moon! What a prodigious sackful of good resolutions you must have, all broken through the middle. First, there are all sorts of resolutions of amendment, of every kind and description, except the resolution of a carter to amend his draft, or that of a gourmand whose appetite fails to drink Chateau Margaux instead of Lafitte. All except these, my dear sir, you clutch by handfuls, and then you get all the resolutions of women of 35 never to marry whenever the opportunity happens, the resolutions of many young heirs not to be taken in, and of young coquettes not to go too far, of old gentlemen to look young, and of vulgar men to hold their tongues. Though I see, my dear sir, that your bag be almost bursting, yet I must trouble you with one more. I had determined, as I hinted in a former chapter, never to quit my hero and go vagabondizing about in my history from one part to the other, like a gipsy or a pedlar, but, on the contrary, to proceed in a quiet, respectable, straightforward manner, telling his story, and nobody else's story but his. But it is this individual resolution that I am now under the necessity of foregoing, for it is absolutely necessary that I should return to what took place at the mansion of the Duke of Buckingham, in Kent, even if I should risk the breaking of my neck, as well as my resolution, in scampering back again afterwards. Early in the morning of the day after that on which Sir Osborne had left the manor house to proceed to the Benedictine Abbey near Canterbury, Sir Payan Wileton, with his large suite, rode up to the gates, and demanded an audience of the duke, which was immediately granted. As the chamberlain marshalled him the way to the duke's closet, the knight caught a glance of the old man, Sir Cesar, passing out, from which he argued favourably for his purposes, doubting not that the discourse of the astrologer had raised the ambition and vanity of the duke, and fitted him to second the schemes with which he proposed to tempt him. When the knight entered, the princely Buckingham was seated, and with that cold dignity which he knew well how to assume, he motioned his visitor to a chair, without, however, deigning to rise. "He thinks himself already king," thought Sir Payan. "Well, his pride must be humoured. My lord duke," he said, after a few preliminary words on both parts, "I come to tender your grace my best service, and to beg you to believe that should ever the occasion offer, you shall find me ready at your disposal, with heart and hand, fortune and followers." "And what is it that Sir Payan Wileton would claim as his reward for such zealous doings?" demanded the duke, eyeing him coolly. "Sir Payan's wisdom is too well known to suppose that he would venture so much without proportionate reward." "But your grace's favour," replied the knight, somewhat astonished at the manner in which his offers were received. "Nay, nay, Sir Payan," replied the duke, "speak plainly. What is it you would have? Upon what rich lordship have you cast your eyes? Whose fair estate has excited your appetite? Is there any new Chilham Castle to be had?" "In truth, I know not well what your grace means," answered the knight, "though I can see that some villain behind my back has been blackening my character in your fair opinion. I came here frankly to tender you, of my own free will, services that you once hinted might be acceptable. Men who would climb high, my lord duke, must make their first steps firm." "True, true, sir knight," replied the duke, moderating the acerbity of his manner. "But how can I rise higher than I am? Perhaps, indeed, my pride may soar too high a pitch, when I fancy that in this realm, next to his grace the king, my head stands highest." "True," said Sir Payan; "but I have heard a prophecy that your grace's head should be of all the highest without any weakening qualification next to any man's. His grace King Henry may die, and I have myself known the Duke of Buckingham declare that there were shrewd doubts whether the king's marriage to his brother's wife were so far valid as to give an heir to the English crown. Kings may die, too, of the sharp sword and the keen dagger. Such being the case, and the king dying without heirs male, who will stand so near the throne as the Duke of Buckingham? Who has so much the people's love? Who may command so many of the most expert and powerful men in England?" The duke paused and thought. He was not without ambition, though he was without the illness that should accompany it. No one did he more thoroughly abhor than Sir Payan Wileton, and yet rich, powerful, unscrupulous, full of politic wile and daring stratagem, Sir Payan was a man who might serve him essentially as a friend, might injure him deeply as an enemy, and he was, moreover, one that must be treated as one or the other, must be either courted or defied. While 1,000 thoughts of this kind passed through the mind of the duke, and connecting themselves with others, wandered far on the wild and uncertain tract that his ambition presented to his view, while the passion by which angels fell was combating in his bosom with duty, loyalty, and friendship, the eye of Sir Payan Wileton glanced from time to time towards his face, watching and calculating the emotions of his mind, with that degree of certainty which long observation of the passions and weakness of human nature had bestowed. At length he saw the countenance of the duke lighted up with a triumphant smile, while, fixing his eyes upon the figure of an old king in the tapestry, he seemed busily engaged in anticipations of the future. He has them now, thought Sir Payan, the crown, the sceptre, and the ball. Well, let him enjoy his golden dream. And dropping his eyes on the table, he gathered the addresses of the various letters which Buckingham had apparently been writing. The Earl of Devonshire, the Lord Dacre, Sir John Morton, the Earl of Fitzbernard, to be rendered to the hands of Sir Osborne Maurice, the Prior of Langley. Ha! thought the knight, Lord Fitzbernard, Sir Osborne Maurice. So, I have the train. Take heed, Buckingham, take heed, or you fall. And he raised his eyes once more to the countenance of the duke, whose look was now fixed full upon him. Sir Payan Wileton, said Buckingham, we have both been meditating, and perhaps our meditations have arrived at the same conclusion. I hope, my lord duke, answered Sir Payan, returning to the former subject of conversation, that your grace finds that I may be of service to you. Not in the least, replied the duke sternly, for it had so happened that his eyes had fallen upon Sir Payan just at the moment that the knight was furtively perusing the address of the letter to Lord Fitzbernard, and the combinations thus produced in the mind of the noble Buckingham had not been very much in favour of Sir Payan. Not in the least, Sir Payan Wileton. Let me tell you, sir, that you must render back Chilham Castle to its lord. You must reverse all the evil that you have done and attempted towards his son. You must abandon such foul schemes, and cancel all the acts of 20 years of your life, before you be such a man as may act with Buckingham. My lord duke, cried Sir Payan, this is too much to bear. Your pride, haughty peer, has made you mad, but your pride shall have a fall. Beware of yourself, Duke of Buckingham, for no one shall ever say that he offended Sir Payan Wileton unscathed. Now, know you that you are in my power? In thine, insect, cried the duke. But begone, you move me too far. Ho! Without there! Begone, I say, or Buckingham may forget himself. He shall not forget me, said Sir Payan. Mark me, Lord Duke. You wisely deem that because you have not shown me your daring schemes in your handwriting, you are safe, but you have yet to know Sir Payan Wileton. We shall see, Lord Duke, we shall see. So farewell. And turning on his heel, he left the duke's closet, called for his horse, and in a few minutes was far on the road homeward. Guilford, cried he, turning towards his attendants, Guilford, ride up. At this order, a downcast, sneering-looking man drew out from the rest of the servants and rode up to the side of his master, who fixed his eyes upon him for a moment, shutting his teeth hard, as was his custom when considering how to proceed. Guilford, said he at last, Guilford, you remember the infant that was found dead in Ashford ditch last year, that folks supposed to be the child of Mary Bligh? Ha! The man turned deadly pale. I have found an owner for the kerchief in which it was tied, with the 2 large stones, proceeded Sir Payan. A man came to me yesterday morning who says he can swear to the kerchief, and who it belonged to. Fie, do not shake so. Do you think I ever hurt my own? Guilford, you must do me a service. Take 3 stout fellows with you, on whom you can depend. Cast off your liveries, and ride on with all speed to the hill on this side of Rochester. Wait there till you see a courier come up with a swan embroidered on his sleeve. Find means to quarrel with him, and when you return to Elham Manor, if you bear his bag with you, you shall each have 5 George nobles for your reward. But leave not the place. Stir not till you have met with him, And now, be quick. Take the 3 men with you. There will be enough left to return with me. Mark me, let him not escape with his bag, for if you do, you buy yourself a halter." "Which of them shall I take?" said the man. "There are Waddlesham and Black John, who together stole the Prior of Merton's horse and sold it at Sandwich. They would have been burned if the hand of your worship had not refused the evidence. Then there is Simpkin, the deer stealer." "That will do," said Sir Payan. "That will do. 'Tis said he set Raper's barn on fire. But be quick, we waste time." It was late the next day before the party of worthies whom Sir Payan entrusted with the honourable little commission above stated returned to his house at Elham Manor; but, to his no small satisfaction, they brought the Duke of Buckingham's letter bag along with them, which Master Guilford deposited on the table before Sir Payan in his usual sullen manner, and only waited till he had received his reward, which was instantly paid; for the honest knight, well knowing by internal conviction that rascality is but a flimsy bond of attachment, took care to bind his serviceable agents to himself by the sure ties both of hope and fear. If they were useful and silent, their hopes were never disappointed. If they were negligent or indiscreet, their fears were more than realized. The moment he was alone, the knight put his dagger into the bag and ripped it open from side to side. This done, his eye ran eagerly over the various letters it contained, and paused on that to Lord Fitzbernard. In an instant the silk was cut, and the contents before his eyes. "Ha!" said Sir Payan, reading. "So here it is, the whole business. So, my young knight. The real name to be told to nobody till the king's good will is gained. But I will foil you, and blast your false name before your real one is known. Good Duke of Buckingham, I thank you. A villain! If I am, you shall taste my villainy. Oh, so he had charge to conduct the Lady Katrine Bulmer to the court. His feats of arms and manly daring shall much approve him with the king. Ay, but they shall damn him with the cardinal, or I'll halt for it. Now for the rest." With as little ceremony as that which he had displayed toward the letter addressed to Lord Fitzbernard, Sir Payan tore open all the rest, but seemed somewhat disappointed at their contents, gnawing his lip and knitting his brow till he came to the last, addressed to Sir John Morton. "Ha!" exclaimed he, as he read, "Duke of Buckingham, you are mine. Now, proud Edward Bohun, stoop, stoop, for out of so little a thing as this will I work thy ruin. But what means he by this? Sir Osborne Maurice! It cannot be him he speaks of. It matters not. It shall tell well too, and in one ruin involve them both. Sir Osborne Maurice! I have it! I have it! Sure the disclosure of such a plot as this may well merit Wolsey's thanks, ay, and even, by good favour, some few acres of the broad estates of Constance de Grey. We shall see. But first let us track this young gallant. We must know his every step from Canterbury to Greenwich." Proud in supreme villainy, Sir Payan trod with a longer stride, confidently calculating that he held all his enemies in his power; but, subtle as well as bold, he did not allow his confidence to diminish in the least his care, and calling to his aid one of his retainers, upon whose cunning he could count with certainty, he laid him upon the path of our hero like a hound upon the track of a deer, with commands to investigate, with the most minute care, every step he had taken from Canterbury to Greenwich. "And now," said Sir Payan, "to morrow for Greenwich. I must not fail the party of Sir Thomas Neville. When enemies grow strong, 'tis time to husband friends." And springing on his horse, he proceeded to put in train for execution some of those minor schemes of evil which he did not choose to leave unregulated till his return. Chapter 17. Chapter 18 of Darnley by G.P.R. James. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 18. Traffic is thy god. Timon. "By my faith," cried the Earl of Derby, as soon as they found themselves in the street, or rather lane, before the dwelling of Sir Cesar. I know not in the least where we are, and if I had known it before, my brain is so unsettled with all this strange sight, that I would have forgotten it now. Which way did we turn?" "The other way, the other way," cried Sir Osborne, "and then to the right." "Pray, sir, can you tell me where the devil I am?" demanded the earl, when they had reached the bottom of the lane, addressing a man who was walking slowly past. "I'll tell you what, my young gallant," answered the man, "if you don't march home with your foolery, I'll lock you up. I am the constable of the watch." "It is my way home that I want to know, friend constable," replied the earl; "for, 'fore God, I know not where I am, any more than a new-born child, who, though he comes into the world without asking the way, finds himself very strange when he is in it." "Why, marry, thou art at the back of Baynard's Castle, sir fool," replied the constable. "Ay, then I shall find my road," said the earl. "Thank thee, honest constable, thou art a pleasant fellow, and a civil, and hast risked having thy pate broken to-night more than thou knowest. So fare thee well." And turning away, he led his companion through various winding lanes into a broader street, which at length conducted them to the mansion of the Duke of Buckingham. "Now, by my faith, Darnley, or Morris, or whatever you please to be called," said the earl, "if you have any hospitality in your nature, you will give me board and lodging for a night. May you make so free with the good duke's house?" "Most willingly will I do it," said Sir Osborne, "and find myself now doubly happy in his grace's request to use his mansion as if it were my own." "Were I you," said Lord Darby, "and had so much of Buckingham's regard, I would hear more of that strange man, if he be a man, Sir Cesar; for 'tis said that the duke and Sir John Morton are the only persons that know who and what he really is. God help us, we have seen as strange a sight to-night as mortal eyes ever beheld." "I have heard one of my companions in arms relate that a circumstance precisely similar happened to himself in Italy," replied the knight. "The famous magician, Cornelius Agrippa, showed him out of friendship a glass, wherein he beheld the lady of his love reading one of his own letters; which thing she was doing, as he ascertained afterwards, at the very minute and day that the glass was shown to him. I never thought, however, to have seen anything like it myself." It may be easily supposed that various were the remarks and conjectures of the two young noblemen during the rest of the evening, but with these it will be unnecessary to trouble the reader. Suffice it that we have translated as literally as possible the account which Vonderbrugius gives of the circumstances, nor shall we make any comment on the facts, leaving it to the reader's own mind to form what conclusion he may think right. Whether the whole was an artifice on the part of Sir Cesar, aided by strongly excited imagination on theirs, each person must judge for himself; but certain it is that they both firmly believed that they saw the same thing; and, as in the well-known case of Lord Surrey, the argument is of no avail that the magician had no object or interest in deceiving those to whom he displayed his powers. The effect, however, upon the mind of Sir Osborne was to give him new hope and courage, for so completely had the former prediction of Sir Cesar been fulfilled, that though he might still doubt, yet his very hesitation leant to the side of hope. Lord Darby laughed and vowed 'twas strange, 'twas passing strange, and wrote it down in his tablet, lest he should not believe a word of it the next morning. When the morning came, however, he found that his belief had not fled, and before leaving Sir Osborne he talked over the business with more gravity than he could usually command. Many arrangements were also necessary to be made in regard to the knight's introduction to the court; but at length it was agreed that the earl should account for his acquaintance with Sir Osborne by saying that their parents had been friends, and that, having been educated in the court of Burgundy, the knight was then in England for the first time since his youth. "All this is true," said Lord Darby, "for my father was well known to yours, though, perhaps, they could hardly be called friends. But, however, there are not above 2 grains of lie to an ounce of truth, so it will poison no one." When all their plans were finally settled, Lord Darby took leave of the knight, and left him to make his preparations for the next morning. As soon as he had departed, Sir Osborne called for his horse, and, accompanied by Longpole, of whom he had seen little since his arrival in London, set out for the house of the honest Flemish merchant, William Hans, from whom, as we have said, he expected sundry sums of money. As they proceeded, the worthy custrel, who, for the purpose of showing him the way, rode by his side, permitting him nevertheless to keep about a yard in advance, did not fail to take advantage of their proximity to regale the knight's ears with many a quaint remark upon the great beehive, as he called it, in which they were. "Lord, Lord," said he, "to think of the swarm of honey-getting, or rather money-getting insects, that here toil from morn to night, but to pile up within their narrow cells that sweet trash which, after all, is none of theirs. For ever and anon comes my good Lord King, the master of the hive, and smokes them for a subsidy. Look at yon fat fellow, your worship. For God's sake, look at him. How proud he seems, waddling forward under the majesty of his belly. Well, if a paunch like that be the damnation attached to an alderman's gown, heaven absolve me from city feasts, I say. And his lean follower, see, with the quill behind his ear, and inkhorn at his button, so meagre, as if he wished to mock his master's fatness. Oh, 'tis the way, 'tis the way. The fat merchant seems to absorb all the lean clerk's portion. Everything begets its like. Fat gets fat, riches get richer, and even leanness grows more lean, as it were, by living upon itself. Now to the left, your worship, up that paved court." The house of the merchant now stood before them, and Sir Osborne, dismounting from his horse, advanced to the door of what seemed to be a small dark counting-house, in which he found an old man, with many a book and many a slate before him, busily employed in adding to the multitude of little black marks with which the page under his eyes was cumbered. In answer to the knight's inquiry for Master William Hans, he replied that he was in the warehouse, where he might find him if he wished to see him. "Stay, stay, I will show you the way," cried he, with ready politeness. "Lord, sir, our warehouse is a wilderness, wherein a man might lose himself with blessed facility. Thanks be to God, therefore, for on May Day, 3 years last past, called Evil May Day, we should have lost our good master, when the prentices and watermen and pick-purses and vagabonds broke into all the aliens' houses, and injured many, but happily he hid himself under a pile of stockfish, which was in the far end of the little warehouse, and to the left of the barrel-room, so that they found him not." While he pronounced this oration, the old clerk locked carefully the door of the counting-house, and led the knight into an immense vaulted chamber, wherein were piled on every side all kinds of things, of every sort and description that human ingenuity can apply to the supply of its necessities or the gratification of its appetites. On one side were displayed 1,000 articles of foreign produce or manufacture, brought thither for the English market, and on the other appeared the various productions of England, destined soon to be spread over half the world. The objects that met the eye were not more various than the smells that assailed the nose. There was the delicious odour of salted fish, there was the delicate scent of whale oil. Here dry skins spread their perfume around, and there a cask of fresh tallow wasted its sweetness on the warehouse air, while through the whole was perceived, as a general medium for all the rest, the agglomerated stink of 100 unventilated years. Making his way through all, Sir Osborne proceeded directly towards the spot where a small window in the roof poured its light upon a large barrel, the contents of which were undergoing inspection by the worthy Fleming whom he sought. In Flanders the knight had known the good Burgess well, and had been sure to receive a visit from him whenever business had called his steps from his adopted to his native country. There might be both an eye to gratitude and an eye to interest in this proceeding of Master William Hans, for the knight had twice procured him a large commission for the army, and, what was still more in those days, had procured him payment. On perceiving his visitor in the present instance, the merchant caught up his black furred gown, which he had thrown off while busied in less dignified occupations, and having hastily insinuated his arms into the sleeves, advanced to meet the knight with a bow of profound respect. "Welcome back to England, my lord," cried he, in very good English, which could only be distinguished as proceeding from the mouth of a foreigner by a slight accent and a peculiar intonation. "Good now, my lord, I hope you have not given up your company in Flanders. I have such a cargo of beans in the mouth of the Scheldt, it would have suited the army very well indeed." "But, my good Master Hans," answered the knight, "the army itself is given up since the peace. When I left Lille, there were scarce 3 companies left." After a good deal more of such preliminary conversation, in the course of which the knight explained to the merchant the necessity of keeping his name and title secret for the present, they proceeded to the arrangement of those affairs which yet remained unconcluded between them. Conducting the knight back to the counting house, William Hans turned over several of his great books, looking for the accounts. "Here it is, I think," he cried at length. "No, that is the Lady de Grey's." "Lady Constance de Grey?" demanded Sir Osborne in some surprise. "Yes, yes," answered the merchant. "I receive all the money for her mother's estates, who was a French lady. Did for her father, too, till the coot old lord died. Oh, it was hard work in the time of the war, but I got a Paris Jew to transmit the money to a Flemish Jew, who sent it over to me. They got 10%, the thieves, for commission; but that very thing saved the estates, for they would have been forfeited by the old King Louis, if the Jew, who had given him money in his need, had not made such a noise about it, for fear of losing his 10%, that the king let it pass. Ah, here is the account. First, we have not settled since I furnished the wine for the company, when they had the fever. 500 shearpeens of wine, at a croat the shearpeen, make just 25 marks. Received 30 marks, 5 carried to your name. Then for the ransom of the Sire de Beaujeu, you put him at a ransom of 2,000 crowns, not knowing who he was; but he has sent you 6,000, because he says he would not be ransomed like an écuyer. Great fool! Why the devil, when he could get off for a little, pay a much?" "No true knight but would do the same," replied Sir Osborne. "It was only by my mention that he got away at all; therefore he was bound in honour to pay the full ransom of a person of his condition." "Well, then," said the Fleming, "here comes the ransom of 2 esquires, gentlemen they call themselves, 500 crowns each, making in the whole 7,000 crowns, or 2,625 marks. Then there is against you freight and carriage of armour and goods, 4 marks; exchange and commission, 3 marks; porterage, a croat; warehouse room, 2 croats. Balance for you, 2,617 marks, 5 shillings, and 2 croats, which I am ready to give you, as well as to deliver the 2 suits of harness and the packages." "The money at present I do not want," replied Sir Osborne; "but I will be glad if you would send the arms and the rest of the packages to the Manor of the Rose in St. Lawrence Poultney." "To the coot Duke of Buckingham's? Ah, that I will, that I will. But I hope you will stay and take your noon meal with me, though I know you men of war do not like the company of us merchants. But I will say, I have never found you any way proud." "I would most willingly, Master Hans," answered the knight; "but I go to the court to morrow for the first time, and I have no small preparation to make with tailors and broiderers." "Oh, stay with me, and I will fit you to your desire," answered the Fleming. "There is a tailor lives hard by who will suit you well. I am not going to give you a man who can make nothing but a burgomaster's gown or a merchant's doublet. I know your coot companions would laugh, and say you had a merchant's tailor; but this is a man who, if you like it, shall stuff out your breeches till you can't sit down, make all the seams by a plumb line, tighten your girdle till you have no more waist than a wasp, and, moreover, he is tailor to the Duke of Suffolk." The knight found this recommendation quite sufficient, and agreeing to dine with the honest Fleming, the tailor was sent for, who, with a great display of sartorial learning, devised several suits in which Sir Osborne might appear at court, without being either so gaudy as the butterflies of the day, or so plain as to call particular attention. The only difficulty was to know whether the tailor could furnish a complete suit for the knight, and one for each of his 4 attendants, by the next morning. But after much calculation, and summing up of all the friendly tailors within his knowledge, he undertook to do it, and, what is wonderful for a tailor, kept his word. Chapter 18. Chapter 19 of Darnley by G.P.R. James. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19. What strange adventure do ye now pursue? Perhaps my succour or advisement meet mote stead ye much. Spenser. A barber surgeon one day, bleeding a farrier, bound up his arm with a piece of red tape, and pinned it. The farrier went the next day to shoe one of the king of the country's horses. As he was driving the nail, the pin pricked him. The nail went too near the quick. The horse's foot grew tender. The king went out to hunt. The horse threw him. The king was taken up dead, and was succeeded by his son, whom he intended to have disinherited the next day for his cruel disposition. The new king cut off his subjects' heads, made continual war upon all the states around, conquered a great many countries, gained a great many battles, robbed, murdered, and burned, and at last was assassinated himself, when human nature could bear him no longer. And at the end of his reign it was computed that 100 millions of treasure and 20 millions of human lives had been wasted, by the barber pinning a piece of red tape, instead of tying it, like his grandfather. "The luckiest accident for you in the world has just happened," cried Lord Darby, entering Sir Osborne Maurice's apartment 2 full hours before the time he had appointed. "Order your men to choose your best suit of harness, to pack it on a strong horse, to lead your own courser by the bridle, and to make all speed to the foot of the hill at Greenwich, there to wait till they be sent for. And you come with me. My barge awaits at the duke's stairs." "But what is the matter, my lord?" demanded Sir Osborne. "At least, tell me if my horse must be barded." "No, no, I think not," replied the earl. "At all events, we shall find bards if we want them. But be quick. We have not a moment to lose, though the tide be running down as quick as a tankard of bastard over the throat of a thirsty serving man. I will tell you the whole as we go." "Longpole," cried the knight to his follower, who, at the moment the earl entered, was in the room, putting the last adjustment to his master's garments. "Longpole, quick! You hear what Lord Darby says. Take the fluted suit." "Oh, the fluted, by all means," interrupted the earl. "It shows noble and knightly. So shall we go along as in a Roman triumph, with flutes before and flutes behind? The fluted, by all means, good Longpole, and lose no time on the road. For every flagon you do not drink, you shall have 2 at Greenwich. Now, Maurice, are you ready? By heaven, you make a gallant figure of it. Your tailor deserves immortality. 'Tis well, 'tis mighty well. But, to my taste, the cuts in your blue velvet had been better lined with a soft yellow than a white, the hue of a young primrose. The feather might have been the same, but 'tis all a taste. White does marvellous well. The silver girdle and scabbard too. But come, we waste our moments. Let 2 of your men come with us." Lord Darby conducted his new friend to the barge, and as they proceeded towards Greenwich with a quick tide, he informed him that some knights, Sir Henry Poynings, Sir Thomas Neville, and several others, having agreed to meet, for the purpose of trying some newly invented arms, the king had been seized with a desire of going unknown to break a lance with them on Blackheath, and had privately commanded the Earl of Devonshire to accompany him as his aid. But that very morning, at his house in Westminster, the earl had slipped, and had so much injured his leg that his surgeon forbade his riding for a month. "As soon as I heard it," continued Lord Darby, "I flew to his lodging, and prayed him to let me be his messenger to the king; to which petition he easily assented, provided I set off with all speed, for his grace expects him early. Now, the moment that the king hears that the earl cannot ride, he chooses him another aid, and I so hope to manage that the choice may fall upon you. If you break a lance to his mind, you shall be well beloved for the next week at least, and during that time you must manage to fix his favour. But first, let me give you some small portraiture of his mind, so that by knowing his humour you may find means to find it." The character which Lord Darby gave of Henry the Eighth shall here be put in fewer words. He was then a very, very different being from the bloated despot which he afterwards appeared. All his life had hitherto been prosperity and gladness. No care, no sorrow, had called into action any of the latent evil of his character, and he showed himself to those around him as an affable and magnificent prince, proud without haughtiness, and luxurious without vice. Endowed with great personal strength, blessed with robust health, and flourishing in the prime of his years, he loved with a degree of ostentation all those manly and chivalrous exercises which were then in their height in Europe, and placed, as it were, between the age of chivalry and the age of learning, he in his own person combined many of the attributes of each. In temper and in manner he was hasty but frank, and had much of the generosity of youth unchilled by adversity. Yet he was ever wilful and irritable, and in his history, even at that time, may be traced the yet unsated luxurist and the incipient tyrant, beginning a career in splendour and pride that was sure to end in despotism and blood. It may well be supposed that the knight's heart beat quickly as the boat came in sight of the palace at Greenwich. It had nothing, however, to do with that agitation which men often weakly feel on approaching earthly greatness. Accustomed to a court, though a small one, if Sir Osborne had ever experienced those sensations, they had long left him. But he felt that on what was to follow from the present interview, perhaps on that interview itself, depended his father's fortune and his own, more, his own happiness for ever. Lord Darby's rowers had plied their oars to some purpose, and before 10 o'clock the barge was alongside the King's Stairs at Greenwich. "Come, Sir Osborne," cried the earl. "Bearing a message which his grace will think one of great consequence, I shall abridge all ceremony, and find my way as quickly to his presence as I can." The two young men sprang to the shore, followed by their attendants, and passed the parade, which was quite empty, the king having taken care to disperse the principal part of his court in various directions, that his private expedition might pass unnoticed, feeling a sort of romantic interest in the concealment and mystery of his proceedings. The earl led the way across the vacant space to one of the doors of the palace, which opened into a sort of waiting hall, called the Hall of Lost Steps, where the two friends left their servants, and proceeding up a staircase that seemed well known to Lord Darby, they came into a magnificent saloon, wherein an idle page was gazing listlessly from one of the windows. "Ha, Master Snell!" cried the earl. "May his grace be spoken with?" "On no account whatever, my noble lord," replied the page. "I am placed here expressly to prevent any one from approaching him. His grace is at his prayers." "Go then, good Master Snell," said the earl, "and bid our royal master add one little prayer for the Earl of Devonshire, who has fallen in his house at Westminster, and is badly hurt, and tell his grace that I bear an humble message from the earl, who dared not confide it to a common courier." "I go directly, my noble lord," said the page. "The king will find this bad news." And making all haste, he left the room by a door on the other side of the apartment. "This is indeed a kingly chamber," said Sir Osborne, gazing around upon the rich arras mingled with cloth of gold which covered the walls. How poor must the court of Burgundy have seemed to the king, when he visited the Princess Regent at Lille! And yet, perhaps, he scarcely saw the difference. Even while he spoke, the door by which the page had gone out was again thrown open, and a tall, handsome man entered the apartment, with haste and peevishness in his countenance. He was apparently about 30 years of age, broad-chested and powerfully made, muscular but not fat, and withal there was an air of dignity and command in his figure that might well become a king. He seemed to have been disturbed half dressed, for under the loose gown of black velvet which he wore was to be seen one leg clothed in steel, while the other remained free of any such cumbersome apparel. The rest of his person, as far as might be discovered by the opening of the gown, was habited in simple russet garments, guarded with gold, while on his head he wore a silver-brimmed black bonnet and a jewelled plume. Lord Darby and Sir Osborne immediately doffed their hats as the king entered, the young knight not very well pleased to see the irritable spot that glowed on his brow. "How now, my lord, how now?" cried Henry as they advanced. "What is this the page tells me? Devonshire is hurt? Is ill? What is it? What is it, man? Speak." "I am sorry to be the bearer of evil news to your grace," replied Lord Darby, with a profound inclination. But this morning, as my Lord of Devonshire was preparing to set out to render his duty to your highness, his foot slipped, heaven knows how, and his surgeons fear he has dislocated one of the bones of the leg. He therefore, being unwilling to trust an ordinary messenger, begged me humbly, in his name, to set forth his case before you, and to crave your gracious pardon for thus unintentionally failing in his service." "Tut, he could not help it," cried Henry. "The man broke not his bones and wrenched not his leg to do me a displeasure. And yet in this is fortune cross-grained, for where now shall I find an aid who may supply his place? But how now? What is this? Who have you with you? You are bold, young lord, to bring a stranger to my privy chamber. Ha! How now, mother of God? You are too bold." Hope sickened in Sir Osborne's bosom, and bending his head, he fixed his eyes upon the ground, while Lord Darby replied, nothing abashed by the king's reproof: "Pardon me, my liege, but trusting to the known quality of your royal clemency, which finds excuses for our faults, even when we ourselves can discover none, I made bold to bring to your grace's presence this famous knight, Sir Osborne Maurice, who, being himself renowned in many courts in feats of arms, has conceived a great desire to witness the deeds of our most mighty sovereign, whose prowess and skill, whether at the tourney or in the just, at the barriers or with the battle-axe, is so noised over Europe, that none who are themselves skilful can refrain from coveting a sight of his royal daring. Allow me to present him to your grace." Sir Osborne advanced, and kneeling gracefully before the king, bent his head over the hand that Henry extended towards him; while, pleased with his appearance and demeanour, the monarch addressed him with a smile. "Think not we are churlish, sir knight, or that we do not welcome you freely to our court; but, by St. Mary, such young gallants as these must be held in check, or they outrun their proper bounds. But judge not of our poor doings by Darby's commendation. He has of a sudden grown eloquent." "On such a theme, who might not be an orator?" said Sir Osborne, rising. "Were I to doubt Lord Darby, I must think that Fame herself is your grace's courtier, acting as your herald in every court, and challenging a world to equal you." "Fie, fie! I must not hear you," cried the king. "Darby, come hither. I would speak with you. Come hither, I say." Sir Osborne drew a step back, and the king, taking the young earl into the recess of the window, spoke to him for a moment in a low tone, but still sufficiently loud for a great part of what he said to be audible to the knight, especially towards the conclusion. "A powerful man," said the king, "and valiant as he is strong, will prove a knight indeed. Think you he would?" "Most assuredly, my liege," replied the earl. "He is your grace's born subject, only his father having fallen into some unhappy error in the reign of our last royal king, Sir Osborne has had his training at the court of Burgundy, and received his knighthood from the sword of Maximilian, the late emperor." "Good, good," said Henry. "I remember hearing of his father. 'Twas either Simnel or Perkin Warbeck, or some such treasonous cause he espoused. But all that is past. Sir knight," he continued, turning to Sir Osborne, "what if in my armoury we could find a harness that would fit you? Are you minded to break a lance as consort with the king? Ha! This very morning! Ay, this very hour! What say you, ha?" "That I should hold an honour never to be forgot, my liege," replied the knight. "And for the arms, my own are here at Greenwich. They might be brought in a moment." "Quick, then, quick!" cried the king. "But we must be secret. Stop, stop! You go, Lord Darby. Send for the arms, quick. Is your horse here, sir knight? By St. Mary, 'tis happy you came. Darby, bid them take the knight's horse into the small court, and shut the gates. Quick with his armour. Bid them put no bards on the horses, and be secret. I'll go arm. You arm here, sir knight. Snell, stand firm at that door. Let no one pass but Lord Darby and the knight's armourer. Be quick, sir knight. I charge you be quick, and, above all, let us be secret. Remember, we will never raise our visors. These knights think of no such encounter, but fancy they have it all amongst themselves. They have kept their just mighty secret, but we will break their lances for them. Ha!" The king now left Sir Osborne, who, delighted with the unexpected turn which his humour had taken, waited impatiently for Lord Darby's return, expecting every minute to see the other door open and Henry reappear before he had even received his armour. At length, however, Lord Darby came, and with him our friend Longpole, who, as the page would only allow one person to enter with the earl, received that part of the armour which he did not carry himself from the attendant without, and then flew to assist his lord. Sir Osborne lost no time, and, expert by constant habit, he put on piece by piece with a rapidity that astonished the young earl, who, accustomed alone to the tilt-yard, was unacquainted with the facility acquired by the unceasing exercises of the camp. At length, while Longpole was buckling the last strap, the king re-entered alone, completely armed, and with his beaver down. "What, ready, sir knight?" cried he. "Nay, faith, you have been expeditious." "Lord bless you, sir," cried Longpole, never dreaming that he spoke to the king, "my master puts on his arms as King Hal took Terouenne." "How now?" cried Sir Osborne, afraid of what might come next; but the king held up his hand to him to let the man speak. "How is that, good fellow?" demanded he. "Why, he just puts his hand on it, and it is done," replied Longpole. "Thou art a merry knave," said Henry, better pleased perhaps with the unquestionable compliment of the yeoman than he would have been with the more refined and studied praise of many an eloquent oration. "Thou art a merry knave! Say, canst thou blow a trumpet?" "Ay, that I can, to your worship's contentment," replied Longpole, who began to see by the looks of Lord Darby and his master that something was wrong. "I hope I have not offended." "No, no," answered Henry, "not in the least. Snell, fetch him a trumpet with a blanched banner. Now, fellow, take the trumpet that page will bring you, and getting on your horse, follow us. When you shall come to a place where you see lists up, blow me a defiance. Hast thou never a vizard to put thy muzzle in? Darby, in that chamber you will find him a masking vizard, that we may not be recognised by his face hereafter." Longpole was soon furnished with one of the half-masks of the day, the long beard of which, intended to conceal the mouth and chin, as it had been worn by the king himself, was composed of threads of pure gold, so that the yeoman bore an ample recompense upon his face for the duty the king put him on. He would fain have had his remark upon the vizard, but, beginning to entertain a suspicion of how the matter really stood, he wisely forbore, and followed his master and Lord Darby, who, preceded by the king, passed down a narrow back staircase into the smaller court, wherein stood the horses prepared for their expedition. All now passed in almost profound silence. The king and his aid mounted, and, followed by Longpole with his trumpet, issued forth through two gates into the park, where, taking the wildest and most unfrequented paths, they made a large circuit in order that their approach might seem from any other quarter than the palace. After gaining the forest on Shooter's Hill, the king led the way through one of the roads in the wood, to what we may call the back of Blackheath, on the very verge of which they might behold a group of gentlemen on horseback, with a crowd of lookers-on afoot, disposed in such sort as to show that their exercises were begun. The spot which they had chosen was a very convenient one for their purpose, shaded on the south by a grove of high elms, whose very situation has not been traceable for more than 2 centuries, but which then afforded a width of shade sufficient for several coursers to wheel and charge therein, without the eyes of the riders being dazzled by the morning sunshine. At the foot of these trees extended an ample green, soft, smooth, and even, round which the tilters had pitched the staves and drawn the ropes, marking the limits of the field, and in the northern end was erected a little tent for them to arm in before, and rest after, the course. The 4 knights themselves, who had met to try their arms, together with several grooms, an armourer, a mule to bear the spears, and 2 horses for the armour, with their several drivers, formed the group within the lists, which, in the wide extended plain whereon they stood, looked but a spot, and would have seemed less still had it not been for the crowd of idlers that hung about the ground, and the 4 knightly pennons, which, disposed in a line, with a few yards' distance between them, caught the eye as it wandered over the heath, and attracted it to the spot by their flutter and their gaudy hues. The king paused for a moment to observe them, and then beckoning Longpole to come up, "Now ride on, Trumpet," cried he, "blow a challenge, and then say that two strange knights claim to break two lances each, and pass away unquestioned." At this command Longpole rode forward, and while Henry and his master followed more slowly, blew a defiance on his trumpet at the entrance of the lists, and then in a loud voice pronounced the message with which the king had charged him. As he finished, Henry and Sir Osborne presented themselves, and Sir Thomas Neville, the chief of the other party, after some consultation with his companions, rode up and replied, "Though we are here as a private meeting, for our own amusement only, yet we will not refuse to do the pleasure of the stranger knights, and as there are 4 of us, we will each break a spear with one of the counterparty, which will make the 2 lances apiece that they require. Suffer the knights to enter," he continued to the keeper of the barrier; and Henry, with the young knight, taking the end of the ground in silence, waited till their lances should be delivered to them. Whether the tilters suspected or not who was the principal intruder on their sport matters not, though it is indeed more than probable that they did; for it was well known to everybody that if Henry heard of any rendezvous of the kind, he was almost certain to be present, either privately or avowedly; and indeed on one occasion, recorded by Hall, the chronicler of that day, this romantic spirit had almost cost him dear, the sport being carried on so unceremoniously as nearly to slay the gentleman by whom he was accompanied, and to bring his own life into danger. On the present occasion no words passed between the 2 parties, and after a few minutes' conversation amongst the original holders of the ground, as to who should first furnish the course to the strangers, Sir Thomas Neville presented himself opposite to the king, and Sir Henry Poynings, one of the best knights of the day, prepared to run against Sir Osborne. "Now, do your best, my knight," said the king to his aid. "You have got a noble opponent." The spears were delivered, the knights couched their lances, and galloping on against each other like lightning, the tough ash staves were shivered in a moment against their adversaries' casques. "Valiantly done!" said Henry to Sir Osborne, as they returned to their place. "Valiantly done! You struck right in the groove of the basnet, and wavered not an inch. Who are these 2, I wonder? They have their beavers down." While he spoke, the spears were again delivered, and upon what impulse, or from what peculiar feeling, would be difficult to say; but Sir Osborne felt a strong inclination to unhorse his opponent, and couching his lance with dexterous care, as far as possible to prevent its splintering, he struck him in full course upon the gorget, just above its junction with the corslet, and bore him violently backwards to the ground, where he lay apparently deprived of sense. By this time the king had shivered his lance, and some of the attendants ran up to unlace the fallen man's helmet, whence, to his surprise, Sir Osborne beheld the countenance of Sir Payan Wileton. He appeared to be much hurt by his fall, but that was a thing of such common occurrence in those days that no further notice was ever taken of an accident of the kind than by giving the injured person all the assistance that could be administered at the time. However, it may well be supposed that Sir Osborne Maurice felt no ordinary interest in the sight before him. By an extraordinary coincidence, overthrown by his hand, though without intention, and apparently nearly killed, lay the persevering enemy who had swallowed up the fortunes of his house, and had sought so unceasingly to sweep it for ever from the face of the earth; and while he lay there, prostrate at his feet, with the ashy hue of his cheek paler than ever, and his dark eye closed as if in death, Sir Osborne still thought he could see the same determined malignity of aspect with which he had declared that he would found his title to the lordship of Chilham Castle on the death of its heir. Still holding the lance in his hand, the knight bent over the bow of his saddle, and through the bars of his volant piece contemplated the face of his fallen adversary, till he began to unclose his eyes and look around him; when Sir Thomas Neville, thinking that the stranger was animated by feelings of humanity, turned to him, saying that Sir Payan had only been a little stunned, and would do very well now. "Gentlemen," continued he, addressing the king and Sir Osborne, "we must, according to promise, let you pass away unquestioned; but I will say that 2 more valiant and skilful knights never graced a field, nor is it possible to say which outdoes the other, But ye are worthy companions, and true knights both, and so fare ye well." The king did not reply, lest he should be recognised by his voice, but bending low, in token of his thanks, rode out of the lists, accompanied by Sir Osborne, and followed by Longpole. "Now, by my fay, sir knight," cried Henry, when they had once more reached the cover of the wood, "you have far exceeded my expectations, and I thank you heartily, good faith I do, for your aid. But I must have you stay with me. Our poor court will be much graced by the addition of such a knight. What say you, ha?" "To serve your grace," replied Sir Osborne, "is my first wish; to merit your praise, my highest ambition. It is but little to say that you may command me when you command all; but if my zeal to obey those commands may be counted for merit, I will deserve some applause." "Wisely spoken," answered the king. "We retain you for ours from this moment, and that you may ever be near our person, we shall bid our chamberlain find your apartments in the palace. How say you, sir knight? Are you therewith contented?" "Your grace's bounty outstrips even the swift wings of hope," replied Sir Osborne; "but I will try to fly gratitude against it, and though, perhaps, she may not be able to overtop, she shall at least soar an equal pitch." The knight's allusion to the royal sport of falconry was well adapted to the ears that heard it. Every one must have remarked that whatever impressions are intended to be produced on the mind of man are always best received when addressed to his heart through its most common associations. Whether we wished to explain, to convince, to touch, or to engage, we must refer to something that is habitual and pleasing, and therefore the use of figures in eloquence is not so much to enrich and to deck, as to find admission to the soul of the hearer, and by all the paths which its own habits have rendered most easy of access. Thus Sir Osborne, without knowing it, drew his metaphor from a sport in which the king delighted, and more convinced of his zeal by these few words than if the young knight had spoken for an hour, the king replied, "I doubt ye not. Faith, I doubt ye not. But this night we give a mummery unto our lady queen, when I shall bring you to her knowledge. 'Tis a lady full of graciousness, and though 'tis I who say it, one that will love well all that I love. But now let us haste, for the day wears, and as you shall be my masking peer, we must think of some quaint disguise. Darby shall be another, and being all light of foot, we will tread a measure with the fair ladies. You are a proper man, and may, perchance, steal some hearts, wherein you shall have our favour, if 'tis for your good advancement. But turn we down this other path, in that I see some strangers. Quick, Mary Mother! I would not be discovered for another kingdom." Chapter 19.